Well, welcome everyone. We're just going to give it a few seconds just for everyone to join the webinar. So bear with us. Okay, everyone. Thank you all for joining the webinar today. So about an exciting topic, cyber risk in the legal sector. So just to go through, we'll start doing some introductions. So firstly, myself, Matt Miller. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Insicom. And we're also lucky enough to have Matthew Robinson here, who's a partner and solicitor of Citation Legal. So it'd be great to get an intro from you, Matthew.
Thanks, Matt. It's great to be here. Yes, my name's Matthew Robinson. I've been a partner of Citation Legal since about 2008, been admitted for almost 25 years and part of the legal industry for approximately 30 years. So Citation Legal, we predominantly focus on workplace relations and employment law, but as part of the Citation Group, we've got a much broader offering besides the legal analysis.
Great. Thank you very much. And thanks for joining us today, Matthew. Hopefully it's an exciting webinar for all involved. So just a little bit of an overview of Insicon. So firstly, we're cyber leadership. So we mainly focus on cyber advisory for boards and executive level, being able to, from a risk-based perspective, present recommendation, best practice to work with customers about dealing with their cyber risk from a top-down approach. We adopt best practice such as the Essential 8, ISO 27001, and other best practices that organisations out there may need to adopt for their operations. So just to hand over to you, Matthew, just a bit of an overview of the Citation Group.
Yeah, so I'm a workplace relations lawyer from the Citation Legal arm. We originally began as a law firm in the early 1990s. We're known as Fisher Cartwright Berryman. We then evolved into the FCB group in the mid-noughties with the development of a technology business called Enable HR. And from that, we also grew to build a HR business and later on acquired some certification businesses. We've been acquired by a UK head office called Citation. And as part of the different business brands that we had, we decided to conduct a rebranding exercise. So we all come under the same umbrella. So our organisation, Citation Group, is predominantly focused on compliance, ensuring organisations are taking appropriate steps with legal compliance, certification compliance, or otherwise safety compliance. So yes, thank you.
No worries. Well, we're very familiar with the citation certification part of the business, being the rebranded best practice. So we do a lot of work there around ISO 27001. So just to continue, so just setting the scene, and again, I really appreciate your insights here, but the way that we see the legal industry at the moment, it's quite an exciting industry, especially from the digitization of information and data. And it's rapidly evolving with the adoption of technologies like AI, and there's a whole raft of different ways that that the legal fraternity is sort of moving and shaking. And it'd be great to get your insights into that.
Look, yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more in terms of the transformation of the legal industry. As I said, I've been involved in the legal industry for 30 years. When I started, we'd open files and we'd smell the cigarettes coming off the files, coffee ring stains on documents. And we've now moved away from hard copy documents and hard copy files and cabinets into solely digital environment, and the extent to which our use of photocopies have been substantially reduced as well. And we're seeing that trend in the use of AI within the legal industry. Also, the courts have predominantly moved towards digital lodgement of documents, and also digital interactions with courts, running sessions via Teams, interactions with online courts on a regular basis. So the trend is quite clear. We are moving towards managing digital client files and digital interactions with clients, as opposed to the physical sort of realities, what we used to do probably maybe about 10 years ago or so, even more.
Yeah, okay. So one of the grassroots in the foundations of cybersecurity, one thing that as a cybersecurity practitioner that we always bring it back to is confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And you and I were having a conversation earlier about this, and confidentiality is just as important, if not more important, to you than say to a cybersecurity practitioner. It'd be great to get an insight there as well.
I think it was beaten into me when I was young and pretty. I think about confidentiality, about maintaining it. It's a paramount duty as a legal practitioner to maintain client confidentiality. Like it's etched in stone in the solicitor's rules under Rule 9 that you've got to maintain client confidentiality. There are only really limited number of exceptions and when you can breach that confidentiality. And so it's not just about not disclosing client information when you're at a barbecue on the weekend. It is how we manage client documents. It's how we manage client files, whether it's in the digital environment or the physical environment. We've got to make sure that we've got our systems in place to ensure that our confidentiality is not being breached. Leaving phones on trains or laptops as opposed to securing penetration by malevolent actors. And that goes hand in glove with our obligation to maintain legal professional privilege. Because if that's waived, then in essence, it gives opponents and other people various rights against their clients. So yeah, it is drummed into us 100%.
Yeah, I can imagine. And look, one thing that we definitely appreciate about the legal industry is also maintaining the integrity of the data as well. If the data is compromised in any way, or it's leaked in any fashion, no doubt that would have a big impact in cases, in matters, and a whole raft of ongoing sort of concerns there as well. Yeah,
look, absolutely, it does. It's one of the aspects, and if you're running litigation, is that you've got to show potentially chain of custody of how client information or client evidence goes from one stage to another. If you lose that chain of custody, the evidence can be unverifiable and it's inadmissible. So that's just one example of it. But it's also to understand that you've got a record of what your clients are instructing you to do. It's no point giving advice on the wrong thing. You've got to be able to show your client provided you with this information. You have then acted upon it. If you can't maintain the integrity over your client's instructions or the output of what you provided, it immediately is negligence risks being flagged.
Yeah, right. Okay. Well, and look, I suppose one thing on this slide, it says, one digital roof, and that's what legal firms really are, is that the sensitivity of the data that's maintained and retained in a law firm is probably higher than most other organizations. So that one digital roof and that one digital encapsulation now is becoming more and more paramount to protect and to preserve. And that's one thing that we're really quite focused on at Insicon about maintaining that, but with best practice in mind, making sure that there's a sense of governance, there's a sense of preservation around that data. So a little bit about Citation Legal.
So I just wanted to give a snapshot in some of the battles that we fight every day. As I said, when I first started, probably when I was about admitted, our IT team and the practice that I was working at, that their job was to tell me to turn the computer off and turn it back on again when it was problematic. Now, our team at Citation Legal, that they are predominantly focused on cyber defence, and they take a lot of time to manage the defence against cyber attacks. So I'll put some statistics up on the screen here. We've got a mid-sized practice. We've got 160 staff in 3 different locations, and our contact details for all the partners and professional staff are actually on the web. Our email addresses, our phone numbers. I get a phone call pretty much every afternoon about 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock from a scammer in India trying to task me about my electricity bills and whatever else. So our information is out there. And so our cyber team are saying that, look, we are facing around about 1,800 phishing emails and penetrations attacks on us each day. So we need to make sure that we are withstanding 1,800 of these every day. And unfortunately, the benevolent actors just need one out of those 1,800 to get through. So I've also put up there about the volume of our emails. So we're sending about 40,000 emails a month. But we're getting in about 1.4 million emails coming into us. And so our systems have got to be scanning and looking at these emails and picking out the 40,000 which we have got huge concerns over and quarantining those. So it is a big burden on an organisation, which, you know, as I said, it's 160 staff. So it's the sort of thing that larger practices or smaller practices still need to manage, no matter what the size are.
Exactly. And look, you know, they're all technical statistics, but it just shows you just the weakness that one little crack in your cyber culture can completely get around each of those technical controls, right? And no matter the size of the firm, like these are the still, you know, they're all relative statistics that people are faced with. And you're just lucky that you do have an IT, you know, organisation within Citation Legal to help prevent these things from happening.
And I try to be very nice to them every day.
Buy them a coffee. We need it.
All right. So I think we just wanted to put up on the screen about some of the cyber risks for legal practitioners. And I think I've talked already about the primary duties of confidentiality and legal privilege. But there's some other variety of legal risks being exposed to. So in the event that information is disclosed to the outer world, you're hacked or otherwise your data is compromised, legal practitioners and firms have got fiduciary duties to their clients. You likely also have contractual duties. I know that in our cost agreements, we've made promises to clients as to how we'll behave in terms of their confidential information. You've also got exposure under the Privacy Act, in particular in complaints to the Australian Office of Australian Information Commissioner. There has been a recent bill, probably around about a couple of days ago, put the Australian Parliament to change the Privacy Act. It's probably one of the biggest changes we've seen in the Privacy Act in about over a decade. It's really playing catch up on a lot of the cyberspace and cybersecurity. In particular, there's a creation of a statutory tort so that class actions can be brought against organisations who have mismanaged data, particularly client data. And that's tranche one. There's also looking to be tranche two coming up sometime in the future, which will allow individual actions against organisations to sue them for breaches. Currently, the proposed statutory tort at the moment has an element of recklessness in it, so it's a higher standard, whereas the tranche two will allow mum and dads who had their data compromised, their personal information compromised, to bring a claim in a court for damages against an organisation. So it's in terms of the risk management, it's one-way traffic. It's all going in one direction. And so, look, from our perspective, we also, as a law firm, we're a business, and so we need to make sure that we understand not just our legal duties and contractual obligations, but also that we can afford to continue running. So there are huge reputational risks. We spend so much time trying to build up in front of our clients through marketing and various initiatives, being the trusted advisor. So clients can come and talk to us. They feel as though that we have got their problem under control. We can solve their problem. In circumstances, if we get penetrated by a malevolent actor and their information is scattered to the four corners of the globe, we just lose that instantly. So our ability to try to have goodwill in our client base shattered. There's huge also financial risks if we're not managing cybersecurity, particularly loss of future income, having to make ransom payments potentially to Russian hackers. We also have the shutdown time. So our organisation, our people are our assets. We earn money through billing. If our staff are not billing because those systems don't allow them to bill, we have no revenue. So in essence, it's like sending the firm off for a 2-week holiday. We've also have loss of prospective revenue. So we'd be kicked off large projects, removed from panels. Also, large litigation projects, we'd be conflicted out because we have potentially prejudiced clients' legally privileged information. And this goes on and on and on. So it makes so much sense from a financial perspective as to why we need to invest into this.
Yeah, look, it's we all hate paying for insurance, right? But and that's what cybersecurity really is in today's age, especially in the digitized age, is that all those impacts that you were talking about, those vulnerabilities that you foresee, are all very much something that you can invest in and ensure that you've got the right technical control, but also supported by the right culture that sits behind it. And I think that's one of the things, again, that we were talking about earlier, is that one of the biggest reasonable steps that I see out there is culture and awareness. It's the people are the first and last line of defense for a lot of those issues that you just raised.
And look, I'll talk a bit further about the culture at a later stage in another slide, but I think for us it's been one of our challenges, and I openly admit, is transforming our workplace culture from to understand and appreciate the cyber risks. And look, any organisation, you have a range of people. You've got the people who are coming newly into the business as part of their employment cycle. They're enthusiastic, they want to go and work, they want to prove themselves and do great things. And you have other people at the tail end of their employment cycle who, maybe wanted to look and move on. And so their motivations and attitudes can be less than ideal. And so we've got to ensure that our cyber culture is reflecting across all of that employment cycle. So we're not just talking to one part of the audience and neglecting the rest.
Yeah, look, complacency is definitely a big threat to a lot of organisations in that regard. So I suppose from a cyber and probably more of a technical perspective, like understanding those risks and how we go about dealing with those. So some common cyber threats to law firms that we see out there a lot is phishing, which you raised about. It just takes one out of those 1,800 to get through those defences. And phishing is probably the most common type of attack that we see out there, especially with the amount of email that you guys get, 1.3 million per month. It's very easy to hide a phishing email in that. But the impact of that is actually ransomware or malware attacks. And I've been through a few of these from an incident response perspective. So ransomware and malware are the most insipid, awful, insidious attacks that anyone can go through. Yeah, exactly. Touch wood. That can go through. The impact is felt organisationally wide, both from a financial perspective, from a capital perspective, from an infrastructure perspective, and cultural perspective. I went through an incident response with a ransomware attack. And one of the soft outcomes of that is the cultural aspect, is the human aspect, where that particular company lost their entire IT team from burnout. Trying to recover from that particular incident was, very damaging from a cultural perspective. So, but also from a legal perspective, the third-party risks, like you are the centre of a lot of people's worlds when it comes to the law and to legal. So being part of an ecosystem, relying on third parties and being a third party yourself, those risks are probably what we see the most at the moment. And going through the whole third party assessments and risk assessments is something that I'm personally doing a lot of at the moment, just to make sure that your house is in order, but you also want to make sure that all those people that you interact with are just as, if not good or commensurate to yours, but also maybe better. And if they are worse, you can at least do a risk assessment on that. And then, the one that we probably overlook the most is insider threats. And it goes back to that complacency. Even simple things like, the Friday afternoon fraud, that where people may go out and have a lunch, or, that they're off to holiday and they get relaxed and things slip through the cracks, right? So there are a lot of different dimensions to protecting data within a law firm. But the output of that, the cost of a breach, like you say, financially is one thing, reputationally is completely a different aspect to it. And again, it's one thing that you never want to be a headline.
No, we don't. In a bad way.
Well, that's right. Yeah, exactly. So, making sure that preservation of your reputation, both for existing client base, but, prospect client base as well, is really important. And also, there's obviously the legal aspect of it as well. There's the liability aspect of all this, which is also, over everyone's head, no matter whether you're a legal firm or otherwise. So, and obviously there's some well-known, examples of legal firms being compromised. So, everyone no doubt would be very familiar with the Panama Papers and the Pipers IT, DLA Pipers IT, that there was 15,000 hours from a ransomware attack that took to rebuild their environment. And what a lot of people don't understand, the human impact of these particular breaches as well. So it is very damaging to the organisation, organisationally wide. So the regulatory landscape, and I'd be really interested to get your perspective on the Privacy Act. You've spoken a little bit about it, but there's a lot of movements in the Privacy Act at the moment.
Yep.
The amendments that are coming. I think there was 116 that were tabled.
Yeah, I think 116 are tabled. I think the government's agreed about over 100 of them, and the changes are probably going to be run through 2 tranches. As I said, there's the first bill has been put forward to Parliament, I think it's the 13th of September went in. So I'm not quite sure in the terms of the timings of when it will go through the houses, but there is certainly an intention to run tranche 2. We're conscious there's an election next year, and so how it manages to play out. But either way, the changes at tranche 1 are certainly important. They certainly pick up APP 11. So we've got under APP 11, there's already an obligation for reasonable steps to protect, personal information. And there's a number of different factors which you look at in terms of what are reasonable steps. There's an additional alteration to APP 11 as part of this new tranche, which includes looking and assessing the governance and organisational structures you've got in place. And that's clearly targeted towards, well, what cybersecurity measures and systems do you have within your organisation to show you are taking reasonable steps? And so, look, it is a critical aspect for any organisation which is ingesting personal information to be saying, well, what are we doing to make sure it's secure?
Yeah, and I think a lot of organisations don't realise that they are purely the custodian of someone else's data. They're not the owner of that data.
Yeah,
and having the right governance and frameworks in place to support that ideology is really important. And that's why one thing the Australian government has done really well in the past few years is release the Essential 8. So that's an ACSC, or Australian Cybersecurity Centre initiative via the ASD to provide some very common, common ways that you can go about protecting your environment and subsequently protecting the data that you are the custodian of. So there's just some simple ones there, like application control. Patch management is really important, but things like multi-factor authentication and backups, they're all very rudimentary fundamentals in running an IT department. But funnily enough, we see a lot of organisations out there that don't take it as seriously as what they need to meet the Privacy Act's impetus, I suppose.
And look, it's one of the things you're talking, going back to the cultural question as well, Matt. It's like we have in our organisation software updates, having to restart computers, and people go, oh, I'm too busy, I can't do it. Or if I close down, I'm going to lose all my work or all the tabs I've got open and whatever else. We need to be able to bust through that and say, do you go to the shops and leave your car windows open and your boot open, or do you actually lock your car? And so it's kind of creating that mentality within the organisation about these are essential things that you've got to do.
Absolutely, and it's got to be a top-down approach as well. And I think that's the part that organisations do rely on their employees to be a little bit cyber aware. But realistically, they're there to be a lawyer. They're not there to be a cybersecurity person. So having that endorsement from a top-down approach is really important. And reinforcing that with a little bit of training and the technical controls to support the Essential 8, or the gold standard, which we refer to being ISO 27001. That takes it to a whole new level, right? So where the Essential 8 has 8 fundamentals, with ISO 27001, we look at 93 controls, and we also look at the organisation, we look at the employee, we look at the physical security and the technological controls. So that really does build in a framework, a governance framework that supports and is commensurate to the data that you store. And that's the housekeeping and the hygiene can be delivered by the Essential 8, but the gold standard, being ISO 27001, incorporates the culture. It's meant to be a cultural change, a cultural shift to support that. So some risk management strategies. We've just sort of distill this down into 5 easy steps, but I'll start with 5. I'll start with the last one, not the first one. The train the staff is something that you and I are both very, very passionate about. I think that training the staff is not particularly a destination; it's an ongoing concern, and it should always be part of the strategy of any organisation to make sure that your staff are trained to a level that they are cyber aware. But I'll now flip back to 1. So assessing your firm's cyber risk. A lot of people don't understand what their risk appetite should be. A lot of people have, a lot of organisations don't really have a risk framework that they sort of dimension cyber risk with. So understanding, so there's a couple of ways that we look at that is understanding where your data is stored, the classification of your data. So there's a lot of data out there, no matter how big or small the firm is, but understanding what it is, what you're actually the custodian of, but also understanding what controls that you've applied to protecting that as well, and the efficacy of those controls. A lot of people go and invest in everything under the sun, but they're all in their own little silos, and that actually creates opportunities for threat actors. Then going into 2, leveraging a cybersecurity framework, and that doesn't mean that you need to certify in it. It means that you just need to align it, you need to understand it, and introduce some of the cherry pick some of the aspects of these frameworks and apply it to your business. The goal ultimately should be to be certified, but just baby steps in order to get there is a really good practice to undertake. Then implementing the basics, like the Essential Act gives you a really good framework to support that. Understanding, just introducing some health and hygiene factors within the environment to make sure that you're patching your applications, you're backing it up, you know where it is, and if anything were to happen, you can recover from that in a relatively easy sense. And then having an incident response plan. This is always the thing that people don't have.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, agreed.
It's and it's not easy. And the reason that people don't have an incident response plan is that, well, where do I start? It's very hard to have an incident response plan if you don't start from number 1. You need to understand each of these aspects in order to get to 4.
And look, I think number 4 is really important. People practice fire alarms and going down the stairs and who's the stair warden. We need to adopt a similar approach as who has responsibilities, who does what at particular times, rather than making it up as you go along. So understanding what roles people play and who's going to be doing what at particular points in time is absolutely critical, because it allows people to just get on and do what they're supposed to do, as opposed to people trampling over each other and not understanding, well, actually, has someone made it worse? So I think the way in which we try to analogize it is it's about a similarity with fire alarm. When the fire alarm goes off, you know what the sound does, you know what you're supposed to do. You don't sit there and continue on talking to a client. You get up and you go. So if there is a cyber incident, we have to treat exactly the same way.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one thing that we're doing a lot of at the moment is business continuity testing. So desktop testing and simulations. That what that creates is a muscle memory that people know their roles, their responsibilities in time of crisis. And a cyber threat and a cyber incident is a time of crisis in the digital world.
Yeah.
And what you're referring to is more, obviously safe health and safety, but from a cyber perspective, if you were to lose the continuity of your business, reputational, financial, revenue, there's a whole raft of things that come out of that.
And then some.
And then some. So, and then ultimately, make sure your staff are trained appropriately. So, some technology solutions that we see applied out there quite commonly in the legal industry is security solutions. So integrated email security, like you guys do a lot of email. There's a lot of transmission of documents and technologies, and your reliance on that must be quite high, that the email's secured at all times.
Look, we do, but we also conduct, going back to point number 5, training of how to spot it, because not everything gets blocked out. We don't have any 100% confidence that the information coming to us is all bright and shiny and beautiful, we still need to be able to spot phishing attacks. We now need to spot whether or not there's benevolent actors pretending to be our clients, or our clients themselves have been hacked, and that things are coming our way that we need to be conscious of. So there is, besides the email security, we still have to have real human beings trying to make some judgments. We've included a phishing email alert button. So if in doubt, press the button. It gets sent off to quarantine and sent off to people who are more qualified than me to assess whether or not the email is legitimate. Sometimes it comes back and says, yes, it's fine. Others it comes back and says, well done, brownie point for you for spotting it. So yeah, it is. It's not just necessarily this email screening. Yeah.
Well, and I think with the uptick in AI, like, we could always identify a phishing email. It was poor grammar, poor spelling, whereas that's all cleaned up now. So they're harder to spot to the average eye. So, but also implementing multi-factor authentication. We all hate it. We all hate having to put in that third number. But multi-factor authentication is really is becoming one of the most effective forms of security for these types of environments. And I know that there's other technologies out there for doing the same thing, but multi-factor authentication should be an absolute mandatory in all organizations, especially legal organizations. Excuse me. So secure client communication platforms, I believe that this is something that's quite prevalent in the legal fraternity.
Yeah, indeed. And so look, it is, sometimes we have to communicate clients in particular data rooms, or we're only able to host certain discussions and communications via these. And often we find that these are client actually invoked. I think from my experience, it might be other law firms have got different experiences, but it's often that we work to the client's requirements to have these communications in that particular environment. So it is something else that we need to adapt to and understand, what's the environment we're going into, and having to talk with our IT teams to make sure that they feel comfortable our systems are capable of properly communicating with that. So look, another example would be is that people send us various materials in large files in hosted sites, and then having to try to transition that big data dumps into our systems, and making sure that happens in a way where we're not just importing a whole lot of malware into our organization.
Well, there is that as well. Yeah, exactly. And look, that's a third party, always the third party risks. Understanding who you're interacting with needs to be known, and it needs to be assessed at all times. So, and then obviously we've got data encryption and backup strategies as well, and making sure that we're maintaining that confidentiality, integrity, and availability, no matter where that data is going to and coming from. It's one thing that that in transit, especially, that we're making sure that the information is not being compromised and the integrity of the data is maintained is really important as well. So having an end-to-end encryption both at rest and in transit is something that we've been doing for a long time, but maintaining it is not easy.
I trust you.
Back up.
So in terms of the Citation Legal and Citation groups, and I can talk about some of the experiences. I've talked about probably there's a multi-layered approach. So we're talking probably about developing the appropriate systems, and then also managing our culture and our people, and then also going back and testing it and making sure it is appropriate and it's doing what it's supposed to do. I think the approach that I would probably analogize it to would be similar to a work health and safety obligations of creating hazard identification, risk assessment, putting control measures in place and mitigating those risks, and then going back and verifying it from the very beginning again, testing it and going around in the cycle. So it's constantly moving through. You're not just simply saying, okay, well, we've done ICT security, they're sitting on the shelf, with the dust getting on it. It's a constantly evolving thing. So one of the things that I guess that we've put in is the developing relationship with appropriate providers and experts. So, we are not cyber experts. We're very good at particular types of business activities, and we know what we don't know. So we need to make sure that we've got partnerships with the right experts. We put in place some MDR solutions, which is software which look at our laptops and our systems to see whether or not things are potentially going rogue, or that they are trying to manage and monitor and flag priorities to our IT team rather than them having to go and look at everything. One of the things that we also included is Dashlane for password management. I think it was one of the things that the legal team hated, was trying to manage the massive amount of passwords. We're having to log into multiple websites, different court portals, and each of them having to be different. And then someone comes along and says, "I've got to change them in 90 days." And so we're finding that there was lots of people who had little lists somewhere, and they're not supposed to do it, and I know not supposed to do it, but we kind of, and so we had to really put our foot down. So we've got this program called Dashlane, and we felt that getting a password management, it's got to be a corporate style password manager. There's a lot of them out there which promise, but we picked Dashlane because we felt it had the best credibility, and so far it's working. So that allows us to log into one particular password manager, then it organizes the rest. The other one was mobile device management, and making sure that if mobile phones, if they get lost, or laptops can be shut down, wiped, isolated, cleaned up, so someone's got a chunk of metal and plastic rather than they've got the client data. The other area which we've also implemented is data isolation for certain staff. It's always it's predominantly people get upset that, why can't I have access to this information? Well, why do you need it? And so that if we don't need our admin team looking at all our finances, we don't need people in finances looking at all our client files. And so we need to segregate certain functions in the organization to have access to unlimited information so they can do their job. And if they need to access other information, they seek permission. That means that if one part gets compromised, it doesn't infect the rest. And that's about communication and telling people it's not about, we don't trust you. It's about making sure that if something goes wrong, we've got a firewall surrounding it. We've actually got compartments in the ship, so the rest of the ship doesn't flood. I think, as I talked about before, about reaction protocols, understanding what to do when the fire alarm goes off. Cyber insurance. Now, I hate paying for my car and house to get stolen and broken and burnt down, but I do it every year. Same thing again with cyber insurance. You've got to have it, I think. And that's it. And lastly, just testing, making sure that you are not giving yourself a pat on the back and saying how wonderful you are, but try to see whether or not your staff have adopted the culture, whether or not your systems are appropriate. You want to fail. You want to learn how you've done it wrong so you can get better at doing it right.
Yeah, it's that muscle memory.
Yeah.
Like, when things go wrong, people know what their roles and responsibilities are. And I think there's a few things in there that, password fatigue is a real thing.
Yeah.
We all hate having, we've all got the same password. It's like, because I don't want to have to manage 10,000 different passwords, but that actually creates the importance of multi-factor authentication as well. It sort of compensates for that. Excuse me. But also the principle of least privileged access as well. And a lot of people don't really get that concept, and exactly what you're talking about with that data isolation is that making sure people have the right authentication and authorization to the data. Being the CEO of Insicon doesn't mean that I get the right to have access to everything, because I don't need access to everything. I can request it, and I should request it. And I think a lot of people sort of have a sense of maybe ego to say, well, I am higher up in the organization, I should have access to everything. Well, not under the principle of least privilege, you should.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that we should really adopt a lot more and also manage a lot more.
And it's education piece to staff to understand it's not about them, it's about the general risk. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. So, and that's great segue into the next one. So the importance of user education is that, and the funny thing here is that they estimate between 90 and 95% of compromise happens due to human error.
Yeah, yeah.
Right, and that comes from a lack of awareness. It comes from a point of ignorance that we as business owners and managers and executives need to ensure that our users are educated to the same level of the data that we store, and making sure that they can see and predict social engineering. And phishing attacks, for example, that weak password hygiene, having Dashlane is a really good thing, and it sort of helps get around that because it will enforce stronger passwords. Insider threats, and you spoke about this earlier about, you know, when people are coming to the end of their tenure, and no doubt in the legal industry, you know, taking customers with you is probably a really beneficial thing for a career. So, you know, we want to make sure that the data doesn't go with that.
I spend a lot of my time in the Supreme Court litigating against people who do exactly that.
Yeah.
And they confuse business clients with personal clients and think that they can take things with them. And it's surprising how many naive people are out there who think that they can download things or otherwise transfer to USB or you know, try to copy things. And often, and I'll deal with it slightly later on, it's often people on their last sort of legs of their employment cycle have problems with their phone. I just need to go and use my personal phone instead because I don't get reception or it's just not properly connecting anymore and I need to use my own personal phone. So
absolutely. The most common thing about cyber is human behavior, and it's one thing that we're spending a lot more time you know, focusing on, not so much of the technological controls. We now very much focus on that human aspect of cyber. And again, that's where, you know, having a good cultural hygiene, making sure that, you know, people are aware of their obligations, but also the controls that you have in place as well. That, you know, it's not just, you know, reliant on the human aspect. You've also got technological controls supporting that.
Yeah.
So they are being monitored in some regards for certain things. That data is being protected to its highest level. So, you know, it's making sure that the cyber culture is as transparent as possible is really important, and it's one thing that you don't want to be seen as a, you know, as a big brother as well. You know, everyone's aware of what their roles and responsibilities are.
And it has to, and I think it's got to be part of the way we do business. In a law firm, as we talked about the paramount duties of confidentiality and privilege and whatnot, it's got to be understood that this is the way in which you behave. And I gave the analogy of locking your car at the shops, but it is leaving the front door of your house and making the house sure the house is locked, that the alarm is on, or that you've appropriately secured your personal effects when you're going out somewhere. You've got to take the same approach to security in the workplace. You are securing the organization against these threats. You may not always stop it yourself, but you've got people to help support you. But if it's a lax standard of, oh, I'm too busy, I'm too important to worry about this, or it's not going to matter to me. Okay, as an example of the password protections, I'm connected to online courts, and if my passwords are compromised, someone can actually impersonate me on the online court, steal my client's data from the court, or otherwise put stuff into the court. So I just don't even dream of what that could actually do.
Well, I'll talk about that in another slide, what it can do.
But it's about creating this culture of that we are all together to stop them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's, again, it's the human is the human firewall is the first and last line of defense in any cyber event. And then training programs and best practices, you know, they just, you know, as part of the reasonable steps is considered now one of the most important reasonable steps out there, to have a, you know, a training program in place. And it's something from every HR department out there should have a cyber training regime out there that they roll out across their user base on a regular basis.
And it's consistent. It's not just once it's done. It's not part of induction. It's part of induction and ongoing. It's a regular course of training.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that I really like about the ISO 27001 standard is the concept of continual improvement. And you get a lot of continual improvement from the training aspects, like where are we weak, who's weak, how do we train them better? So you do get a lot of really good metrics out of those particular platforms, which is great.
Yeah. So as part of our people relevant issues, like as I said before, our people are our greatest asset, but also our greatest liability. And so the sorts of things that we struggle with, and I'm going to be honest about how we've tried to constantly managing. I think the key areas are people wanting to bring their own devices. They want to be able to, you know, log in with this and whatever else. There's always a really good, convenient excuse, which is supposedly underpinned by some form of efficiency. But it is, okay, it might be more efficient to use that particular device, but efficiency is only one part of the role of what you do. Protecting the client data is also a key part of what we do. I think I find personally that I might have difficulty with people bringing iPhones. Apple, in my experience, tends to want to share with Apple and share with everything. And so data can be absorbed into these phones, and suddenly it's shared with iPads and iWatches and all sorts of stuff. Also, I think other key areas, I think we all, when COVID pandemic hit, everyone raced to go out to work from home, and business continuity was a big issue. But slowly but surely, people started recognizing the risks of the working from home arrangements and the extent to which are they creating other problems. So the idea of what devices are being connected into the system at home, are people printing things off and leaving them around the house? Physical access to devices by third parties, roommates, guests, even kids playing on work devices and clicking on links to things. And kids are very good at clicking on links to get through the next thing and not understanding what they're clicking on. So they're sort of the aspects. If your staff are working from home, you've got to, I think, look at that risk profile in a different way. And it's about trying to be honest with that particular person, saying it's not about cringing on your personal space and having question marks over your roommate or spouse. It's about protecting the organisation. The other aspect is fixing compatibility issues. They always talk about being busy is always an excuse to not do things. But also we find that people say, well, look, I can't connect in, or it's not working, or this is not happening, to create a whole lot of workarounds to be able to do this. Look, I confess that we had only recently someone from our service team had been working for about 12 months outside our system. We didn't know about it until we went through an exit process and went, oh God. And so it was a situation where we went, right, well, we need to go and address this. So when there's compatibility issues or been raised, or it's not working properly, you've got to deal with it. It's not part of the too hard basket. It's like leaving your car door open at the shops. We've got to go and address it to make sure that you don't leave the car door open, you go and fix the door. I think also I talked about before about the training and explaining to staff about why we're behaving in a certain way. We're not limiting you having access to certain data because we don't trust you. It is about trying to ensure that people are only accessing the data they need to do their job. And if people can get into that bit, that's all they can go and see and do and break and steal. And so we're protecting the rest of the organisation structures. We don't want to get violated in one business arm, and it ends up resulting in cascading across all our business arms.
Okay. Very good. So look, just implementing some change. So there's three really simple things. So enhancing a firm's cyber resilience. Everyone needs to go on that journey, and promoting the things that we've been speaking about around training and awareness. Also overcoming some common implementation challenges, not too dissimilar to what you're just talking about, is making sure that those work from home challenges, that we're taking a risk-based approach to internal aspects, but also third-party and external aspects. We try and automate everything as much as we can. That just keeps commonality within the environment. And then we measure everything. We measure everything that we do, and the mean times to detect, respond, contain, and recover, which is very much out of a NIST framework, allows us to get better. We identify it, and then we improve from there. So just some future trends that I just want to close on. Just some of the things from emerging cyber threats in the legal sector is ransomware is not going away anytime soon. It's continuing. We have regimes against us. It's not the kid in the basement doing this. It's actually regimes, and countries profit from those types of attacks. Data breaches will continue, whether they're externally or internally. So data leakage is something that law firms probably need to put on their #1 priority. About making sure that data doesn't exit or egress the business unnecessarily, and we do that via data classification. Social engineering is always there. We're always looking for an angle, and especially with the advent of AI deepfakes, we've seen compromises now with deepfakes, which is terrifying, and it's just something that we need to continue to stay abreast of. AI is great in one area, terrifying in another. And the role of AI in law firms, you know, I've used recently Luminance, which is a legal practice application, excuse me, that has AI in it. And that's, you know, provides a lot of benefits, but also provides a lot of, you know, potential of, I don't know, data compromise as well. And the role of immutability in data and document security, again, we go back to that confidentiality, integrity, and availability of our environment. So making sure that it's never compromised. We can hand on heart say, both technically and ethically, that the data that we have, that we're the custodians of, hasn't been tampered with. And again, you know, things like blockchain is becoming probably front and center with a lot of that type of contract management as well. So just in conclusion, so some key takeaways. You can see there, you know, over in the UK, 85% of UK's top 100 firms are extremely concerned about cyber threats. I would have thought it would have been 100% personally, but anyway, PwC say that it's 85%. So the threats are real and they're relative to the size of the practice. And I think that everyone needs to invest in their cyber defenses. Hackers will target staff, whether that's via email, whether that's by social, or whether that's physical. We all need to be vigilant in regards to protecting our environments and also ourselves. Social media is the biggest form of data leakage out there. Just even telling people where you are on the weekend gives away a lot. Cloud data is still needs to be backed up. Cloud data is there's a preconception out there that just because it's in the cloud, it's protected. It's still up to you to implement those controls. And as you said, quite rightly, you need to have a plan when things go wrong.
Yep.
Right. And building that muscle memory into your executives and into the people in that incident response team is absolutely critical. So, and you know, use a specialized cybersecurity partner. Again, as you said, is that you're a lawyer. I'm a cybersecurity guy, and my brother said to me once, I said, "Why don't you change the oil in your car?" And he went, "Well, I'm an accountant." I went, "Yep, I completely agree with that." So I think that's, you know, we spend a lot of time training in cybersecurity. We spend a lot of time with best practice, ISO 27001, and we can help adapt those to, you know, to the organization's needs. So anyway, in conclusion, that's not a bad wrap up. What do you think, Matthew?
Indeed. Is there any probably questions from the Q&A section? I thought.
Let's have a little look.
From the more button.
Yeah.
I think there's been some answered questions.
Okay.
So anybody else got any further questions before we depart?
No more questions. Okay, well, thank you very much, Matthew.
Thank you, Matt. It's been fantastic. Really enjoyed it.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And thanks everyone for attending the webinar. There's my contact details, info@insicon.com.au for any follow-up. Thanks again.